In the additional reading posted this week, Stuart Zediker and Whitburn discuss empathic listening, and they give us insight into it as Carl Rogers really pioneered this research in empathic listening and really expanded how we understand it both as a concept and a practice in our relationships. Empathic listening involves a number of things, including sensitivity to the other person, flexibility within the communication encounter so that you gauge the other person's changing, fluctuating emotions and you're able to adapt. Also, there's a laying aside of oneself, your own interests and motives, in order to really enter into another person's world. And that is an invitation by them to enter in their world, which is really a beautiful picture of what's going on within those empathic listening encounters. And it's moving beyond just simple understanding, because that's what's really going on in the interpreting process. You're moving beyond just understanding a message. You're really getting to those deeper levels of meaning related to the emotional state and the attitude and the tone and the interest and the external factors and internal factors that are weighing in on that moment. So as we look at the skills that can be developed to be better empathic listeners, there are 3 that are advocated by Stuart Zediker and Whitburn in their particular chapter. First is focusing, and this is choosing to invest the time in another person, especially through the behavioral components of empathy. And so your focus is on aiming your posture toward the other person as a message that where your posture is aimed, also your thought processes and your emotional state and everything about you at that moment is aimed in their direction. Making natural and appropriate eye contact dependent upon the cultural identity of the other person and the context that you're in. So this is very important that you're culturally sensitive to who the other person is and you make appropriate adaptations to their particular cultural framework that they're working from. Also, that you're responsive with your movement and sounds to the other person, not to indicate agreement as we looked at earlier in the behavioral component of empathy, but to indicate listening. Additionally, you are going to want to encourage the other person to open up. That is to really pull as much information as you can out of the other person. And as you're trying to pull that information out, there are certain things that you can say and do that will encourage this. First of all, you can ask for elaboration through phrases like, keep explaining, or for example, could you tell me a little bit more about that? You can use mirroring as a way to phrase a question. This is when you say something that the other person just said, a phrase that you have picked up on as being important to them, and you then rephrase that in terms of a question. You usually do that by just having the tone of your voice go up at the end of the phrase. So maybe you heard a friend say, and that really made me upset. You might say, that made you upset? And that indicates to them that you want them to elaborate more on the nuances of what upset means to them. You can also ask clarifying questions. And when you ask questions, you want to be open-ended rather than close-ended so that it really gets the other person to talk more. You can use attentive silences to also show the other person that you want them to open up to you and speak more often. We tend to be a little bit scared and frightened away from silence and pauses within communication. That's a cultural phenomenon within the United States and within our particular culture for the most part. And when you use an attentive silence, this indicates to the other person that you're relinquishing what they probably see as your turn to speak within the communication encounter. And just because of the norms within conversations, when someone speaks for a long time, they realize after a point in the conversation that, it's the other person's turn to talk and I need to give them an opportunity to do so. But in empathic listening encounters, when you really want to show the other person that you're concerned about them, you want to learn more about what they're going through. And what you can do is you can use silence to basically say to them, look, I don't need a turn. I'm here to listen to you. I want to know more, and therefore I want you to speak more often. So that is another skill that you can use. You do want to avoid a couple of things that can be harmful to communicating empathy and can create defensiveness in the other person. One are pseudo questions that really sound more like a complaint or an accusation, and another are the why questions that put the other person on the spot. They may feel like you are probing them in a way that they're not comfortable with. They may not have thought out all of the whys and hows related to their particular situation or problem that they're going through. And so when you ask the why, it makes them feel like I should have the answers, I should know this already. And when they don't, they may feel dumb, or they may feel frustrated with you, or they may feel like, well, what am I doing if I can't answer their questions? So that can really do more damage than helpfulness. So those are two things to avoid. Then the final skill that's discussed in empathic listening is the skill of reflection, engaging in reflecting. And this can be done through a number of different things, beginning first with paraphrasing, that is restating the other person's meaning in your own words. There is a 4-step process in the additional reading that helps you to better understand ways that you can paraphrase. And basically what you're doing is you're restating the other person's ideas in a way that makes sense to you, to really gauge whether or not you have accurately interpreted their, not just message itself, but all the implications of that message and the nuances of meaning. And then you follow this with a restatement of a question that will help to verify your accuracy. Now, we can use examples from our own experiences to help identify with the other person and to verify whether or not we understand them and we've interpreted then that message in a way that reflects where they're coming from. And I will warn you against using too many examples from your own life, because what happens when you use too many examples from your own experiences is that you then make the encounter more about you than the other person. And you get into what we call the I syndrome. It's all about me. The focus then is back to me, and I have to think about how this relates to me rather than really focusing on the other person. Just use as examples as a tool for paraphrasing and reflecting and clarifying. You can also gently probe when you detect discrepancies between verbal and nonverbal messages. And I say gently there because it's very important that you are gentle and diplomatic when you do that, because you don't want to put the other person in a place where they feel frustrated or where they feel like you're calling them out. But you want to delve into deeper meanings. So if someone says, I really don't care, it's no big deal, but you can tell by the tone of their voice and other things that they've said within the context of the situation that they really do care. You might say to them, I know that you said you don't care, but your tone of voice and some other things that you said, I'm just wondering if maybe you care a little bit more than you're indicating. How do you feel about it, really? That lets them know, they really do want to listen to me. They really are concerned about what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking about at the moment. So these are 3 specific skills that can assist you when you're trying to communicate empathically. But in addition to empathic listening, there's another type of listening that's pointed out within our additional reading that focuses not on self, not on the other, but on creating what we would label new meanings. And we'll talk about that next.